Good morning, one and all, or just one. If no, there are three. This is great. Um, uh, Welcome. We're going to do this for an hour and a half, as we do every Saturday. Today, I'm doing it at 9 o'clock. Normally, I'll do it at 11, but today and last week, I needed to do it at 9. Uh, so, welcome to all three of you, and to anybody else who joins us. And I have a question for you. That is, what can I do to make my videos better? And at the same time, I am happy to take any questions or comments. And there's one right here, Rev Wait says, I think we are in for a Sisyphean effort, but what else is there? And the answer is, from my perspective, I'm really glad you brought this up. Life is inherently Sisyphean. And if you want to, this is, so you understand that I do this work from one end of the spectrum to the other, from cradle to grave. Cradle being, yesterday afternoon, I spent 3 hours in my weekly study research group with scientists working out the process, not just the origins of life, but the origins of all of the evolutionary steps. Hey there, Three Raven. Good to see you here. All of the processes by which hierarchic emergence really happens. The physical work that changes when, for example, we became multicellular, or when in the process prior to Luca, the last universal common ancestor of all of us. That is, how did we end up with the whole system of DNA, RNA, proteins? How did we come up with that? So we're doing that detailed work on the origins of life. And from it, I have a sense of the nature of life that I would argue is different from the kind of abstract speculation that we do when we talk about consciousness or willpower. There's a way in which, in the sciences and in the other realms, philosophy, spirituality, we just work with these unexplained explanations. In my work, I have to be able to explain what information is from the ground up. My assumption is that nothing is information until there are interpreters, living beings that are interpreting it. Everything is potential information to the likes of us, to living beings. But I have to be able to explain all of that in terms of strictly physical work, none of those abstractions. And then I go all the way over to this other end, where I'm working on philosophy and psychoproctology, dealing with assholes and all of this. And there's straight up continuity. I do not get to posit unexplained explanations like information or spirit or even motivation. So when someone says, I think we are in for a Sisyphean effort, I say amen, and here's why. Today, you will produce 330 billion replacement cells. You have to, because your cells are dying at that rate. So one of the main things I end up focusing on is what happens when you've got language, organisms like us, and how the whole conceptual world is revealed to us at that point. Not revealed to it, but we're exposed to it. And then how do we deal with that? How do we cope with that being humans? It's radically different from being other critters. I made a few comments. What I do, I invite you to, if you're interested in my endless verbosity and briefer forms of it, I encourage you to Facebook friend me at Jeremy Sherman, because I'll come up with ideas at night, during the day, and it's my commonplace book. I also recommend this for you. Hey, Shirley, great to have you guys here. Hey, Kwahu, nice to have you here. But when I have a new idea, I mostly jot it down as a bumper sticker on Facebook first. So there I am, Jeremy Sherman. Come join me there. In a way, it's got advantages over this. For one thing, you don't get a freaking marathon from me, an hour and a half, which would be more than I could put up with if I had to listen to someone else and couldn't talk. But it's also a place for us to have this conversation. So I'll put something up and I'll get responses from people, and we start a nice dialogue there. So I said, here's a couple of things I wrote in the last 12 hours. Whatever the meaning of life is for other critics, For humans, it's largely to feel meaningful. And then I post in a comment, which is why only humans ask what is the meaning of life, by which we mean, what should I do to feel meaningful? I'm just going to read a couple of these. Aggression is as much a product of unreceptivity as it is of belligerence. Just a thought. If you want to, here's the one that I wanted to get to. If you want to understand the human condition, consider millennia of folk living in squalor and decay, insisting they have immortal, immaterial souls. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about as a Sisyphean effort. We are profoundly, in a way, I am a test case for getting people interested in what the actual fuck we are, and the amount of splaying where people want to go any direction but actually wondering about what we are in physical terms, where they basically become dualists and they argue, well, there is this thing called information, or there's this thing called spirit, whatever, some unexplained explanation. That is autophobia. That's fear of self-knowledge. And I think it's tightly tied with cephalophobia. Hey, Michael, good to see you here. And everybody. Cephalophobia is fear of decay. So really just visit this thing since Rev Wait brought it up. And I also like that we are revving and we are waiting. What are we waiting for? Probably some sense of having arrived at the plateau culmination where we no longer have to make that Sisyphean effort. But what else is there? I'm still just working this first point that Rev Wait made. Nothing. There is nothing but that, but with language, we can pretend and claim that there is. So all of these, I think the human appetite for absolution, which is freedom from schlep, freedom from hassle, freedom from doubt, the idea that you could have landed someplace on a plateau and be free from that stuff, absolved. And why? Because you are perfectly adapted to reality. That is, you have the absolute truth. That's the only alternative, and it's bullshit. And I think we need it. I think we need to have those dreams of landing on the plateau, and I think they will kill us. That is, if we take them too seriously. So that's why a lot of my work is on off-jerking, how to get those fantasies of those romantic fantasies played out, exercised, but not in reality, because they're really dangerous in reality. I mean, I'm 68, so I don't have the hormonal certainty I used to about falling in love and all of that. And I had a wonderful, glorious love life. And I mean, I got to be on all the rides in that amusement park. But at this point in my life, I honestly think it's safer, at least for me, to play out my romantic self-idealization. And I do think romance is invariably self-romance. It's a sense that I've got a meaning. I'm exceptionally meaningful, all of that. I prefer to play that stuff out in fiction. And I think it's really important we do so. So I don't know if you saw this thing I posted on YouTube, which was a cartoon that was sent to me by one of our colleagues, because we are by now colleagues. Those of you who come and visit this thing, who watch my videos, it's research colleagues. And this guy is just, I've loved what he's brought to the conversation. A guy named Dana Powers, and he just sent me a cartoon that I just thought was brilliant, because it's basically saying that you are doing your patriotic duty when you watch a movie or when you jerk off, rather than doing it in the public square. That is, if you jerk off and then zip up afterwards, you are doing your patriotic duty. You are exercising your romantic urges, your self-romancing urges, without making a mess of the public square, without basically jerking off in the municipal water system. So really, I'm trying to make entertainment a human necessity. We have to recognize that entertainment, setting aside the aesthetic and the wisdom you might get from it, the educational and the aesthetic are often blended in with entertainment. But I want to argue that entertainment is really largely about this need for affirmation, which is really dangerous when it turns into a cult like it has in Trump. So how do you exercise that? Because you're not going to stop doing it. You know, I was talking to a philosopher friend yesterday, and he was saying, so couldn't we just get rid of it? No, we can't get rid of that. Every effort to suppress the ego just turns into another ego trip. So I'm saying, no, we got to exercise our egos, but do it safely. That's long-winded. It's probably a rewind. You probably heard me say that before, but I'll say it again and then again because I think it's really important and it's easy to overlook. And then there's the law of sevens in marketing, which is nobody hears anything until they've heard it 7 times. Okay, let's see. Let's see. Falling is closer though. Okay, wait. I'm just trying to figure out where this is. Michael, I love that you off-jerk to Lego. That's great. And I have my grandson who's 7. I'm still checking with him, but last I heard he wants to become a full-time Lego professional. It's all he wants to talk about. When we sit down, I mean, he's just obsessed. So we got to get you two together. Hey, Ricky, bassoon. I have one. I should give it away. It was once top of the line, and I haven't played it in years. Yes, I'm a bass player now. Okay, let's see what we've got here. There was something I want to pick up. Someone forgot my RX for play. Good, Shirley, I get that. Yes, my recommendation is just do it. Yeah, you find a place to do that. Falling is the most dignified. No one learns from standing above. I'm gonna pick up on that from Captain Spock. Yeah, I think I'll introduce a concept that is important in my work, and so my main research colleague, this guy Terence Deacon, and you should look him up at some point. Terence Deacon, just so you know, you could say the pedigree of where I'm coming from. I have worked with this guy for 30 years. I wish for everyone this degree of intimacy in conversation that is by now we know we have so many inside jokes, so many common assumptions as we explore further. And unlike me, he's not a prickly guy like me, but unlike me, well, what we have in common is that we keep on exploring. So we don't want it to be too narrow a focus. That is, I'm really glad that I'm following out the same grooves for all this time, but I also recognize that that's dangerous. That the fact that I agree with what I said 10 years ago could mean that I was right or could mean that I'm just stuck. So I have to keep that in mind, and he keeps that in mind beautifully. He's one of the most he's by far the most curious man I've ever known. And not for lack of knowledge. He's an intellectual in that he's ongoingly curious. But he's writing a book on this thing right now, and I want to remind you of this thing. We're arguing that it's the other half of what's called natural selection. So we think that actually evolutionary biology is only now beginning to reckon with the fact that Darwin is a crucial part of the story of what's going on here. But it's not even, it's really half, and it's not even the living half or the generative half. So this has always been the problem with natural selection as an argument. Let's see. I have to be careful here because I don't want to go, this is a longer riff and I probably should just make a video about it, but I want to make sure to be addressing your question. Here's the heart of it though. How natural selection is not selecting anything. There is no selector. It's not God choosing Noah or Job or any of those. It's not that. It's not a conscious being that has preferences. Natural selection is really just the second law of thermodynamics. It's just that any kind of order or constraints will tend to become deconstrained over time. Any kind of segregation will tend to get desegregated. So it doesn't really address the question of how life generates. It's almost like saying, I can explain mountains exclusively through erosion. No, you have to explain what gets eroded, okay? And for that, this is the tie back to falling is the most dignified. He's writing a book called Falling Up. And so here's something that Darwin picked up on, but he didn't take it all the way out. And since him, only very few have. It's to survive, you need to produce more than replacement rate. If you just replicated one after another, there would be no life. When there's multiplicity, there's competition. This is what Darwin paid attention to, is that, if you got a bunch of contenders, then it's a trial and error process. But what we all know from personal experience is that when there are multiple contenders, there's also the potential. They're under less pressure to do, how do I put this? I'll put it in very personal terms. Suppose you find a partner, business partner, romantic partner. You both have a capability of doing something. But since you both have that capability, one of you can drop it and the other one can do it. So you can end up with a division of labor, as you do in partnerships. And then once you have that division of labor, once you have the atrophying of a capability in one being, then that being can actually morph those capabilities towards some other capability. So we talked about this briefly in the last live, and I don't want to go into it too far. I guess what I'm saying is I'm excited by it, and it's basically how if you get multiple copies of things, they can fall, they can degenerate, but they already had function, and then they can end up in new synergistic complementary functions. And that ends up being the overlooked half of what's actually going on. It's how I ended up with all these specializations. For example, fingers that are different in their specialization, teeth. That is redundancy, what we call relaxed selection, and then new synergies and new, you could say, addictions. So my body cells are now all addicted to each other. They are a larger system. It's an important concept, probably doesn't belong here as much as I'd like to say. Okay, so let me stop waxing and actually start reading. I just bought Deacon's books. Thank you for doing that, Michael. Most people, including a lot of researchers at high levels, find them hard going. I feel really lucky that it's been a conversation with him. And I have pushed him on how hard going they are. There was our biggest fight ever was about that. I was saying, and he concedes the point. At Harvard, they said that he wrote like a truck. But if you're going to read his books, I also recommend the book I wrote, not as a sell job. I just want to tell you, the book I wrote was basically Cliff Notes Deacon, or an introduction to Deacon's ideas. That's the book Neither Ghost Nor Machine, The Emergence and Nature of Selves. It's Columbia University Press, so it's a little pricier. It's like, I forget, like $35 or so. Happy to send you a PDF of it or a computer-generated audio of it. But it's designed to make it as accessible as possible, what he's saying. I think he's onto really important contributions. And obviously, don't take my word for it because, I could be partial. But if you look at just the substance of it, I have found it just mind-blowing for understanding what's going on with me, for understanding what's going on in my world. Okay. All right. Let's see. How do we address the insatiable addiction for the MAGA, since they don't engage in reality and their consumption of the outrage economy? Okay. So I'm glad you asked that. That is a huge question for me. Joshua Smith is part of the study group that meets every other week to deal with this question. And I won't take refuge in pious failure, as many people are tempted to do these days. That is, I won't say they're incorrigible, literally uncorrectable. They're addicted. At the same time, I think it is probably the hardest addiction to overcome. I think we're in really bad trouble because a bunch of people have just gotten addicted to what I'm calling herobotics. That is, robotically playing hero. It is way easier than being human if you can get away with it. And so this is another example of what I was just talking about. Falling up. Imagine, so this is a useful connection for me to be able to make here. I've got my doubts. I've got my whole consciousness process for dealing with when a habit of mine is failing. And then I find something like Trump or something like Buddhism. It doesn't matter what, some doctrine, something like Eckhart Tolle. So I don't care what doctrine. but something that makes me feel like I don't have to doubt anymore. So I partner with it, and my capacity to doubt atrophies because I am dependent upon it. And from now I am entered this new, easier state of being herobotic, and I'm doing it by addiction to Trump's authority or whatever. And now, what happens? This is exactly like what happens in an addiction. You know, your body is generating pain-killing endorphins, and then you find an external source of endorphins in the form of morphine, and your body downregulates the production of endorphins. And if you were to take away the morphine, the exogenous form of morphine, the body has lost for a time the capability of making its own endorphins. That's what's happening psychologically with Trump. And let me give you just another example so you can start to see how I'm drawing these parallels. I am finding parallels and contrasts across every part of life. We are exactly that way about vitamin C. All other mammals produce their own vitamin C, except for guinea pigs and primates. And we talked a little bit about this in past sessions. Why is it that we don't produce our own vitamin C? Why do we need exogenous sources, external sources? Why do we have to eat fruit? We can trace the genes that produce the vitamin C in other organisms. We have that same gene, but ours has atrophied. It's become junk DNA. How did that happen? 35 million years ago, we come out of a nocturnal existence because we become arboreal. We live in trees now. 35 million years ago, there's fruit there already in a codependent relationship with birds. Birds eat the fruit. Birds disseminate the seeds. We start eating fruit. Now we have two ways to make get our vitamin C, which is basically anti-rust. It's anti-degeneration. It's protection for our cells. Okay, so now we have two ways. That means we can afford to lose one. We were up there consistently accessing fruit enough that we have lost the capacity to produce our own, and now are also dependent on, like birds, on fruit for the vitamin C. So draw this parallel. You do that with your doubts. I don't have to doubt. Trump has explained everything to me. I never doubt anymore. I'm herobotic. So back to your question, how are you going to get people to go cold turkey off of that kind of authority? One version of it so we haven't talked about how you do that overall. We talk about how do you talk to Trumpists to try to bring out a little bit of doubt. I am writing something now. I'm working on a video on how to deal with Trumpists as they start to show a little bit of doubt. Because I hope we start to see signs of that. I don't expect a lot of it. My prediction is that 70% will stick with him no matter what, because what you've become is a master excuse maker. You never have to doubt, you never have to care about anything inconvenient because you've got this entire repertoire of virtues you claim to be the authority on. That's actually what Trump gave them. He says, no matter what it is, I am the infinite in it. I believe in infinite love, infinite strength, infinite toughness, whatever. You just pull out your ass, whichever one, and say, impossible. I don't have anything to doubt. I am the height of this. So my last video was about the problem we've had with infinite, believing that morals are infinite, that you can just collect them all and turn them all up to infinity. I think it's been a real problem. I think the left probably started doing this the most, my generation, the counterculture, but they've taken it and run with it. And so that video got about 1,000 views. I thought it was better than that, but what do I know? But anyway, if you haven't seen it, I recommend it because I think I'm onto something that I find very interesting. Okay. Let's see. So how we deal with that addiction, another would be if you get people into halfway house addictions. Basically, just change the lifestyle brand. Find it's a little bit like that cartoon I posted. if we could get people to divert it, that's basically, I think, my main answer to the question of how do you wean people off of this addiction, is if you can get them to do it in fiction instead. And that raises a question. If I'm watching a movie and I'm feeling like the hero of that movie, but I know it's fiction, can I get the same uplift off of it as if I really did feel like I was really a hero in the real world? I think that's an interesting question. My answer is that we can be strategically gullible like that. I think that most people, if you're not tempted into some, no, my romantic fantasies are real. If you're not tempted into one of those things, then you do perfectly fine with fiction. I mean, I think most people do. They don't go out and pretend they're gods like the MAGA people do. They do it at home. They jerk off. They do it locally. An example for me, and this is a touchy one, is I think that there's got to be some of that in most partnership. There certainly was for me. There was a way in which I felt heroic because I was partnered with my partner. Now, in my case, that turned out to be not sufficiently fictional. And it's one of the reasons why I'm not interested in doing that, the romantic dance. I still flirt. I still get together with the way I think about it is it's a kind of it's a pseudo date. It's me and women going out and having a conversation and gazing at each other's eyes, doing what's left of that old appetite, but not crossing lines. We don't want the complications that come from actually trying to pull that thing off in our late 60s. Like last week, I visited with a lovely woman who is 84, and we had some of that, but we didn't cross any lines because it's fictional. It's more like nostalgia at my age. I don't know how you could handle that at a younger age, but what I am saying is that at least be paying attention to the question of where are you going to self-romance? Are you going to do it in fiction? Are you going to do it in reality? If you go way deep into reality, it gets addictive and troublesome. And that's what we're seeing among the Trumpists. Okay, let's see what we got here. Wobbly idiot vision. I could be wrong about that as well. Let's see. Let's see. I don't. Kwahu seems to get into dialogues with people who are in the conversation. I like that. I don't end up finding that where the thread starts and whether there's anything for me to stick my oar in. But let's see. The only way to combo hero would call them out. You'd say anything. Michael, thank you. To feel like a hero. Yes. This is an argument that I have made for a long time, which is that you've got to call them out on character. You cannot afford to talk details. You cannot afford to get into a moral debate about this stuff. I think at that level of addiction we're seeing, it's animal braying presented as a papal decree, but they don't actually care about the words they mean. So you've got to attack character, and you've got to do it in a way that I think, from my perspective, you gotta not care to try to persuade them. You can't be trying to convince them you were right. You got to do it from a kind of detached amusement, because you lose power when you lean in and try to persuade them. And you want to plant as many seeds as possible that it's unimpressive to you, that basically they're masturbating in public. And I'll go all the way out with them when I'm on the thuggish end of the spectrum, where I'm trying this thing where I say, God, you guys will say anything, and what's nice about that one is that they will say anything to defend themselves if they stick around. But the big problem with these guys, as far as I can tell, I deal with as many of them as I can. at this point, trying to figure out, you can't talk to them, but you got to be able to engage with them in some way that protects us. You know, if we didn't have to live with them, we could just say live and let live. But you can't say live and let live with people whose decisions you have to live with. So I'm stuck trying to figure out how to engage with people who will escape the second it feels threatening. So in recent weeks, I've done more of this kind of asking, what are your standards? I want to understand your standards, so I understand. You called that derangement syndrome. How do you decide what's deranged or not? None of them stick around for that because they're jerking off. They see a thumbnail. They say, "Oh, good, this is a place where I can speak truth to power." Whatever. And then they put down their absolutely cliche street fighting bullshit. Their wannabe tough guy bullshit, and then they leave. So it's different if you've got engagement one-on-one, and I really encourage it. I've got some with a few people. There's what Trumpists I talk to for an hour and a half every 3 weeks. That's been more. And if you've got family or friend, there are things you can do when you've got some rapport with them that you can't do. Oh, let me move that. That you can't do when you don't have rapport. When they're just dipping in quick, it's much harder to make any progress with it, because they'll just dip right out. Let's see. Just little seeds, and you don't get to stick around. It's a little bit like teaching preschool. You don't necessarily know where these guys. Sorry, I'm not trying to be patronizing about it, but what I'm saying is you're planting seeds you don't get to see grow up necessarily. I mean, whether those seeds turn into something, you won't get credit for it. I don't care about getting credit for having changed a Trumpist. I think we all just have to plant those seeds of doubt, and that we're going to get some fertilizer from the fact that this can't end well for them. It could end much worse for us earlier than it does for them because they're trying to stick it to us. But we know, it's just straight up obvious right now that if anybody does this thing where they shut their eyes and say, I'm king of the world and all my decisions are right, it's a disaster. It's never been otherwise. Cults are not the way. Okay, and this does come back to the thing about the origins of life and the nature of life. It's all checks and balance. And so if you got unchecked power, there's no consequence, paying no attention to feedback, it's going to die. That's just not how life can possibly work. Okay, in your 60s, something magical occurs. You don't need a relationship, but a relationship with yourself. No, not pulling it off. Brad, I thank you for that. It's an interesting question. I know plenty of people my age who are, you could say, addicted to partnership, and they love to be in partnership. Remember, I'm not paying attention to the difference between love and addiction. To me, they are both pretty much the same thing. I don't want to get into the judgment about whether it's good or bad. I'm just saying that in both cases, you're doing dedicated work to maintain something you're dependent on. So I'm addicted to vitamin C. I'm addicted to grocery stores. I'm addicted to Wi-Fi. I'm addicted to my friendships. Some of my addictions are more fungible. That is, I don't care what grocery store I go to, but I do need a grocery store because I don't grow my own food. Friends can come and go up to a point. I'm more addicted to some friendships than others. But my addiction to vitamin C is fairly, you could say it's fungible in that it doesn't matter what vitamin C I get, but I do need it or I die. So I do know people who really want to be in partnership, and they talk about it that way. I'll ask 70-year-olds if for some reason you were single again, would you repartner? And some say yes. There's talk about to prefer your own company to bad company, and I tease about that by saying to prefer your own bad company to other people's bad company. I don't have that problem now. I really like my company. I feel lucky, and I'm not saying I'm good. I'm just saying I like to hang out with me. Um, uh, and just it, no, when I get a wide open day to work and think, it's my joy. And but that wasn't the case for me for a long time. So I'm really interested in this question that you bring up, Brian, about whether in your 60s, I wouldn't generalize it. There are people, but there is something. Here's what I want to say about it. There is something about once you find that doubt can be a gold mine, that doubt and curiosity is not just painful and anxiety producing, but it actually can be a gold mine. Once you find something to channel your doubts into that keep you engaged, that keep you, as I said, the way I describe it is my happiness comes from having work for which I have infinite patience. And I could also say infinite delight. So, for example, the last video, I really like this idea. I got it stoned one night. I tend to get stoned at night on sativa. And an idea hit me. It was just an embellishment of something I'd been working on before. This thing about infinites, moral infinites, like you could never have too much of it. And I started to write it up, and then I went to visit my daughter for a couple of days and started to write it up there, and then came home, and by then I had a pile of notes about it. And I ended up starting from scratch. The idea was clear in my mind. It probably took me 4 times longer to write than usual, and I probably threw out 4 times as much as I kept in that video. That's my idea of a good time. That's I have no problem with it, but that's because it's mistake-tolerant work. Editing and writing, you're making mistakes all day long and throwing them out. Very different from surgery. So what I'm saying is there is a sweet spot on the other side of the terror of doubt, the anxiety of doubt. And so in a way, my question is how to bring people over to that side of it. And I think it was 3 videos ago that this was the topic. It was a video in which I'm talking about how the Dunning-Kruger effect is not as smart as it thinks it is. Because it's not dealing with how painful curiosity can be, how painful doubt really is. Just taking a look at what that video was called. Yeah, it's this one, how to save civilization before it's too late. I'm struggling with the naming thing. If this was a different, I'm trying to get views. And so I asked the computer whether my name for the article has enough brain Velcro or heart Velcro to bring in more readers or more viewers. But anyway, I recommend that if you're interested in this thing where you don't say, well, no, curiosity is fun. Choose curiosity. And you don't say, confidence is key. It's in between there where you recognize, no, doubt is a fucking pain in the ass. Doubt hurts. Doubt is an alarm going off saying that you don't. It's basically, think about it as a pointy, long-nailed finger that taps you on the shoulder and says, yeah, you haven't got it covered. You haven't got it covered. And imagine how that would feel, or think about it like if you lived in a 1990s neighborhood where the car alarms are going off all the time. No, that's not fun. That's not fun. But there is a place you can get to on the other side where curiosity gets fun. And I have to also factor in that curiosity gets fun probably most or only when you got your basics covered. If you're in pain, I doubt curiosity is fun. I mean, if you're in physical pain, or if you're barely feeding your family, or if you've got to juggle way too many obligations and you're doing an inadequate job at it, I do not believe intellectual curiosity is likely to feel like much fun. So I have to keep factoring that in. I ended up in this situation. I did my tour of duty. I have 3 kids. I had a marriage. I had lots of anxiety that just drove me to distraction. But then I entered into this temporary open plane where I could do what I wanted with my life. And at that time, I started connecting with Terence Deacon, but more fundamentally, in a way, what I did is I channeled my anxieties into core fundamental questions. That's what happened. And so if you can get there, nice work if you can get it. I don't know that you can get it, but that seems to be the sweet spot. And you could say that what's going on right now for many people is that it's moving in the other direction. That is, life is getting freakier, scarier, and doubt. People are just jettisoning doubt, jettisoning curiosity, becoming increasingly sensitive, increasingly critical, increasingly touchy. That's the video that I made 2 times ago, which is how to handle criticism fair and square. I think we're in for a whole lot less curiosity, and that's going to make it hard for us all. Okay. Thank you, John Doe, for saying that. Yeah, that was my hottest series, How to Roll Trolls and Stump Trumpists. I'm trying to relive the magic. If anybody has an idea what I should do for that, that would be good. But I was getting like 150,000 views on some of those videos, and I think it probably was market driven. That is, there was still hope that we could turn this thing around before it became what it is now, and that people were trying to figure that out. I think that demand has dropped. And so I actually want to say to anybody who's actually dealing with those questions of how do you roll trolls, stump Trumpists, how do you eke out a little curiosity from such people, I want to say thank you. That's exactly what America needs right now. And that's not a branded statement. I am saying that if we don't figure out, that's what the world needs right now. If we don't figure out ways to bring back, to seduce or kick people back into some realistic curiosity, we're doomed. So thank you for doing your global patriotic part. And also, I want to say congratulations. That's exactly what I'm talking about. If you can find something curious to be curious about like that, that's the sweet spot in life, from what I can tell. So congratulations on finding what, at least from my perspective, is a juicy question that you'll be able to juice for just the rest of your life. I mean, I do not figure that I am done. I don't think, I consider this work to be a fruitful exercise in futility. I do not think I will ever get to a recipe for bringing out the curiosity in people who have become absolutely incurious. And I do not believe I'll ever come up with the definitive objective definition of incuriosity, absolute incuriosity. But boy, is it fruitful for me to dig in that. I do not believe that about the scientific work I do either. That is, I assume that if you're gonna be trying to figure out what the actual fuck organisms are, what it is to be alive, if you're going to venture into that high venture game that people have been playing for 2.5 thousand years, there's a really good chance that you'll have spent your entire life barking up the wrong tree. So I love these fruitful exercises in futility where I'm not aiming for a plateau, and I'm also at an advantage because I don't need fame in order to keep food on the table. So I actually get to err on the side of honesty over popularity. I mean, I like the popularity. I like to know there's an audience, but it doesn't. I mean, I'm totally impressed that 42 people are on this video, because I would do this stuff myself if I didn't have an audience. It's apparent I do it myself anyway. So all right. So let's see, where are we? I'm sure I've left a split end thread somewhere. If there's something you're burning to know, burning to discuss, that is, really want to get to it, and I'm not seeing it because I'm a slow reader all along the lines here, and I'm busy talking, say it a few more times. If you got a question or something you want to challenge, one of the ideas I've got here. Let's see. My father was very. I'm going to pick up this from What the Hell. My father was very pro-Trump before he took office. Now it's very hard to make any sense of his political comments. I think he may not be too satisfied. Thank you for that. There's the work we do on the assumption that this is the new reality. but reality keeps changing. And I really do think that is going to be a lot of disaffection from Trump. That stuff was all very fun to do. Is basically fiction before. Build the wall, make America great, lock her up, all that stuff. It's fun, like a death metal concert is fun. But and I was kind of hoping people would recognize that. But anyway, it may be that the only way we could have ever grown out of this childish, prissy, wimpy, make-believe thing was to actually have it reality checked. To me, public public opinion is the only remaining guardrail, and I don't even think it necessarily will have any bearing on the future of the country. That is the things that Trump is doing now are so cavalier that the New York Times today suggests the possibility that he assumes that there won't be any more elections, that it'll just be the dynasty, the Trump MAGA, the broligarchs from now on. But the remaining thing, if you're watching anything, we used to watch how the polls were going for Harris versus Trump, and then Congress and all of that, and what way the Supreme Court would go. About all that's left at this point, there's questions about whether Amy Coney Barrett is becoming more on the fence within the Supreme Court. But what we really need to be watching is how fast do these boiling frogs admit that they're boiling. Boiling frogs jump out of boiling water. Humans are the ones that don't, because we can rationalize anything. So I do watch those polls, and I don't know if you noticed this. 24 hours ago, 538, one of the main polling sources, disappeared. ABC cut it off. So I had to go scrounging for recent polls. But anyway, your father, are you talking to your father? I know it's hard to make sense of his political comments. I want to encourage you to think that they're not really comments. He would like you to believe that there's content there, but it's way more feeling than it is comment. And they're just putting together excuses for why they're right, righteous, and mighty no matter what. It's exactly it's very standard, and the excuses are all kind of the same. So be careful not to read too much into it. Like I said, I think it's animal braying. You find something delicious, and then someone starts to take it away, or reality checks show you can't have enough. Think about how an alcoholic would justify their alcohol, or a heroin addict. I'm encouraging you to think of the possibility that your dad isn't actually making sense. It's more like the justifications you would get from an alcoholic. And I think he may not be too satisfied. So what the hell I'm trying to think through what you do when someone is still justifying and that he may not be too satisfied. How do you reach out to them? At that point, you don't do what we're talking about earlier, which is you just say, wow, you'll say anything to pretend you're heroic. There's a little bit of curiosity there. There's something tapping on his shoulder. The car alarms are going off. He can kind of hear them. He's still trying to drown them out, but he can kind of hear him, and the question is, how do you engage with him at that point? And maybe the solution would be at that point, and only at that point, engage with him on any place where you already have some rapport. If there's anything your dad and you used to like to do together, or still like to do together, or if there's anything your dad likes to do that, and don't talk politics. And see if that's enough that he might bring it up. That would be ideal. And I'm just guessing what might work, and that's my guess for the moment, okay? But I'm really glad to hear that your dad may not be that satisfied, because actually it's not going to be satisfying for anybody. Maybe ask your father what hasn't been fulfilled, what promises haven't been kept to his liking. That's a great one. This just came from Michael. Michael, I like that one a lot. And the pairing of those two is in this. it's not a good time to ask him what feel like threatening questions. So how to ask it in a way that it doesn't sound like it's a cloaked threat and it doesn't sound threatening, but actually sounds like you're actually curious about their opinion. How you do that is really interesting. Okay. My friend hasn't spoke to you in years. Okay, that's right. Uh, that's Kwahu. I understand, and I continue to think that's part of the solution. Remember, from my perspective, there's three main moves, and I get this not just from some psychological observation. There are three main moves in physics that are essential to understanding what goes on in how we'd ever get the physical dynamics that would generate an organism. Uh, uh, they are basically, you think of them in terms of physical work. There's things that don't engage with each other. There's physical work. There's molecules that are just not near each other. They're constrained, so they're not doing work on each other. They could be constrained by a barrier, there's something between them, or by distance or whatever. So that's the equivalent of psychic space. But if there is engagement and there is give and take, and those terms, I describe them as if hermaphroditic. You don't know which is which. But if you think about it, it's basically assert versus accommodate. Um, jut out your elbow or tuck in your elbow would be one way to think about it. All I've got, the core moves I've got is assert, accommodate, leave. And any one of those could be beneficial or non-beneficial. So with my clients, when they're trying to deal with something like, they're dealing with someone who has become robotic, for example, over what? It doesn't matter what. It doesn't matter whether they're robotic because their only cause is because I said so, or because they're Christian, or because they're Buddhist, or because whatever. Doesn't matter. But when they've gotten to a point where they're no longer receptive, we look at what they could do within the realm of assertion, accommodation, and space taking, and various blends of them based on what their capabilities are too. You got to work with what you are able to do. So I have clients who aren't very good at assertion, and we try to figure out ways that they could do some assertion. They also are, I have clients who could do it, but couldn't stand the repercussions of it. So they're so backed into the corner by someone that if they try to regain some ground, the other person comes down hard and they retreat. So in clients like that, I'm trying to teach them what I call repercussioning. That is, you don't even say something assertive unless you can cushion yourself against the repercussion. And for that, you got to remember that these guys are robotic. You're going to get a repercussion. That is, if you say anything that challenges their authority, they will get medieval on you. That's what they'll do. And it'll be animal brain. It'll be robotic. So how to be inert in that situation where you can actually assert and then go inert. And also inert, but not blocked, not space taking. You actually inert by Steelman arguing whatever they say. So the person who you're talking to might wallpaper the entire world with "you are the problem." You are the problem. And how to be able to voice that confidently, saying, "No, I hear you. This is what you think of me. Tell me if I got it right." That whole business. But to do that from an inert place and say, "Yeah, no, my opinion is different." That's a hard skill that for some of my clients to get. I'm getting better at it. But for that, you can't be in the business of trying to persuade them as if it depends. You need to change their mind. You're just trying to show, yeah, interesting. You have this opinion. I have this opinion. Don't be a wuss. Admit that I have this different opinion from from you. Admit it. Maybe the most I'd be asking to try to get out of a conversation with someone and curious. I know you're scared that I might have a different opinion from yours. I know you might be a little conviction impaired. Like, you got your convictions, but damn it, the world has other convictions, and what are you gonna do about that? I get it. But the truth is the truth. I have this other opinion from you. I have a different interpretation. I also found it useful to say, instead of saying, let me make sure I understand what you think, I am actually now saying, let me make sure I understand what you feel. Because I don't think it's at the level of thinking. I think it's at the level of feeling. Another thing I posted last night. Um, let's see. Let's see. Overthinking isn't the problem. It's feeling too much, pretending it's thinking, and accusing others of overthinking. I don't think overthinking, I mean, there's a rumination, but that's not exactly overthinking. That's running down an anxiety rabbit hole. But thinking as curiosity, I don't actually think is a problem. But I do think a whole lot of people feel intensely and pretend it's thinking. Um, yeah, Joshua Smith, I you bring up Dietrich Bonhoeffer. I have great admiration for him. And I have dipped into it not nearly enough. I plan to get to a full reading of it, but part of the reason I don't think I would, is I don't hear enough. I think it may have suited a different era how he's dealing with the psychopractological questions, because I think it's possible, and I don't want to misrepresent him because I don't know him well enough. It's possible that he was trying to out-virtue the virtue signaling of the Nazis, and that would make perfect sense for his era. But I don't think it works in this era as much. So remember, he's a devoutly religious man, and he's trying to bring back the liberal virtues, and to move people towards a higher degree of piety. In and my problem with that at this point is, first of all, I don't think strategically that is going to work. I see liberals doubling down on that kind of virtue signaling piety, and I think it misses the point about virtue. Virtues cost. I'm actually thinking about them as budgets now. Care costs. It costs a lot to care about other people. It costs a lot to try to have integrity. So I'm having trouble with this way in which we say, well, that sounds like a virtue, so why doesn't everybody just choose it? From your personal experience, you can't love everything. You can give lip service to it, but you can't actually love everything. If you could love everything, then everybody would just partner with everybody else, and it would all be. That's not how we do it. We love our kids. Because we love our kids, we actually prioritize them over other kids. Because we love our spouse, we're actually prioritizing them over that. So this business where we say love is the answer, and the problem with our enemies is all this hate, I don't buy it. I wish I could, but it doesn't. That's not actually how morality works. And I think we're in trouble for saying that. Like I described it before, it's like trying to sell people on eating less pizza by telling them that pizza tastes bad. You know, you should have integrity because hypocrisy is bad, and you won't like it. Nonsense. Hypocrisy feels really good. It's freedom. And so for you to be in a straitjacket, for us to be in straitjackets, moral straitjackets, saying, why don't you choose our virtues? They feel much better, to someone who's out there dancing on their pinheaded hypocrisy, I don't find credible. So that's why I'm still looking for what to do about that. And so I guess one thing that you might do, Joshua, is you got the Bonhoeffer that you're reading, and check out this last video I did, which YouTube called "This is Why We Keep Losing Debates with Idiots," and and dig into that contrast, because I think you'll find between the contrast between some of the stuff you get from Bonhoeffer and some of the stuff you get from me, um, you'll find some interesting curiosities to play with, some interesting questions to deal with. Yeah, okay, so Josh, watch this. Watch this. I'm gonna take what you just said. I prefer integrity and it keeps fake people away. Okay. It makes for oh wait, okay, so I'm gonna say yes. Okay, so let me understand from you, because I just reading some context here. Are you putting that in quotes, or is that actually what you're saying? Just let me know. Okay, so I am saying a statement like that is what you get from Trumpists. You get it from everybody. Everybody says integrity is good. I have it. I prefer integrity. It keeps fake people away. It's in the same dimension. So I I want to address this one. I want to confront this one because it's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Suppose I said, I'm not into game playing because I hate game players. Okay. Okay. You see that. Good. Good. Yeah. I'm no, the fact that you don't like to be game played or deal with hypocrites says nothing about whether you game play or are a hypocrite. And every douchebag in the world can say, if it sounds good and I want to feel good about myself, it's about me. You know, Trump, Jesus is good. I want to feel good, so I'm Jesus, or I'm with Jesus, or Jesus is with me. That's dumbass. It makes you a dumbass in no time, and the most highfalutin dumbass. And that's the challenge I want us to deal with. I stay away from it. Lacks integrity to claim one has integrity. Anybody who tells me they have integrity, it's a major red flag. And I did a video on this a while ago, and yeah, it's actually a fairly important uh, idea to me that let's see. Um, when you think about what we start with, it's not like our minds are computers. We have cognitive dissonance if we can tolerate it. What we are is this teeming bank, this thoughts flying in from every possible direction. Think about how many jillion little notions come to mind every day. Okay, are you going to pretend that you've got them all consistent with each other? Do you know what that would take? And do you know where you started from, which is these random thoughts streaming through your mind in every possible direction, all sorts of impulses, many of them half thoughts. What would it mean to claim you have integrity? The closest you could get is what I would call doubt tolerant, or intellectually, you could say cognitively bi-curious. That is, you could occasionally notice some of your inconsistencies and actually be curious about them. But to declare that you have integrity is the opposite of that. Okay, I'll come clean. I'm a scoundrel. No, I don't want to go that far either. You can go pat either direction. And I'm trying to stay in the middle. So yeah, I was trying to remember that I once said to a girlfriend that I didn't like her baby talk. I said it more tactfully than that. And she said, I don't baby talk. People like it when I baby talk. And everybody baby talks. So that's that kind of flailing that I think any of us can do. So imagine if I did that about being an asshole. I'm not an asshole. People like it when I'm an asshole, and everybody's an asshole. That's not integrity, and I'm trying to avoid pat solutions. I'm trying to actually keep my eyes on the questions. So I don't want to say I got perfect integrity, and then someone says, "Well, actually, no, you don't." I say, "All right, fuck it, I'm a scoundrel." No, I don't want to do either of those. I'm trying to stay in the middle. I'm trying to balance on these curiosity questions. And this I also notice is a problem with my videos, is that people come to videos for pat answers. And so There's always been a problem with my writing. When I was writing, I read 1,000 blog articles for Psychology Today, and people would say, "Okay, but where's the deliverable? Where's the formula? You bring up all these questions. You clearly don't have the answers." That's right. That's right. How do you? Okay, I practice integrity. Um, Here's something that goes on for me whenever anybody, including me, self-reports. I understand that appetite to describe oneself, and I understand it as a important branding tool in our uh, social courtship. That is the courtship we do to get a job or whatever. I practice integrity. I find it extremely dubious when I do it or when anybody else does it. So I try to not do it. And I bring that up because I just did it. If I said I try to not do it, that's self-description. So there's a limit to how far I can go with this. I would not say I practice integrity. I I do practice integrity, but it's not actually something I want to say. Because I I mean, what I do is I practice what you see me practice. But I have trouble with someone trying to commandeer someone else's intuition. Like if I said, believe me. Um, what am I actually saying there? I saying, I suspect you don't believe me, so believe me. I'm going to tell you. I'm an instructor. You should believe me. Don't trust your intuition about me. Trust my intuition about me. I don't like that. And I don't brag on purpose. It's just, I want you to notice the paradoxes of self-description. I don't brag is a brag. And I I'm not, I'm saying these are the challenges we deal with. I do like having gotten to a place where my mind is not consumed with what I am. I really, it's just such a relief. I was so self-obsessed. I think I told you in a recent video that I had a friend who said to me on my 30th birthday, "You know what I wish for you, Jeremy? I wish you'd just fuck up royally one time and you'd see that the whole world isn't paying attention to you like you think you are." It is. And what happened to me was, it feels like I got over that question, and it's become a little bit of a problem. Let me just explain. Um, I fired around this morning like I always do, and then I come on this video, and I find myself a little nervous before these videos to make sure that, because it's a little bit of a popularity thing. Will anybody show up for my video? But people do, and I come on, and then afterwards I am surprised. I find myself surprised that I had that much content to deliver. I don't actually worry about it. I never think before the video, okay, well, what am I going to talk about? I just live and breathe this stuff. But that I am surprised by it afterwards came up for me this week. I don't go around thinking about what I am. The closest I get to marketing myself is thumbnails and titles for videos, and I'm not very disciplined about it. I'd do better if I was more disciplined on it. But I find when I wrote books, I'd write the book, and then I'd do my dutiful marketing of it. But I didn't want to get into the question of what I am. And now that I'm not dating, I don't pay nearly as much attention to how I look, and I don't want to see it. I don't want to think. I'm having too much fun with ideas, and I think that has gotten me into trouble. Is that I don't know how I come across to people, close friends. So I lost a good close friend a couple of weeks ago, and I think it's partly because I don't know my own. This will sound pompous, but I suspect it's because I don't know how I come across to someone at close range. Can you imagine having to deal with me at close range? It'd be rough going. I'm a lot. And yet I don't end up thinking much about how I am a lot, I suspect. And don't take my word for it. In a way, I'd be the last to know what I really am. Because self-reporting bias is such a thing. Make up your own interpretation of what I am. But I have been reflecting. I do get to have my guesses about what I am, but I have a feeling I mean, if I just monitored the amount of time I wonder how I'm doing, it's 0 these days. And it was easily 90% before. Okay, so how often do you think about your own death? A lot, but in a different kind of way. Um, uh, yes. So for years, I thought about it in what I call eschatophobia. So it's interesting because I've been pretty much atheistic for a long time, but I still have this sense that in the end, it would be determined whether my life was well spent or bad spent. So that's the question of final judgment, eschatology in Christianity. And I noticed that when I had a rough patch about a year ago, where it was like a post midlife crisis, lasted a few weeks, and I got really self conscious during it, and I found that the eschatophobia came back, fear of that I had lived my life in vain, or that I had all these wonderful options and I had failed at them. Now, mostly my attitude about that was transformed by realizing that I'll be demented. That doesn't end well. And to live towards the culmination like it's a movie is to misunderstand what life is. I'm trying to live a good life, but there is no final judgment like that. And lots of people die, popular heroes who turned out to be disasters later. And like I said earlier, that is, I could have spent my entire life not just barking up the wrong tree, but barking up a tree that's bad for society, even though I was trying to make it good for society. I read a lot of intellectual history, and you're watching people who were titans of their era, and they proved wrong. So there's that. So on this question of death, what I think about is that it's coming and coming soon. I memorized poetry about this. I think I took very much to heart my parents' deaths at 59. I'm 68. I'm older than them by a lot. But they both died at 59 of different cancers. And my dad was very interesting about it. Um, uh, and I don't think my last thought counts for much. And I also have noted lately just what one of the great mercies of life is that you don't feel anything after you die. That is, I'd rather not die, um, but to not feel anything after it, for nothing to be there, that's both a nightmare and it's also it's a mercy. And then for all these people to say, no, you will feel things, and you could live in a torture chamber for eternity. What a vile move that is. I understand why we'd make that move. It's a great motivator to say you could live in Disneyland eternally or in a torture chamber, but what a cruelty to humankind. So I think about my own death a lot. I do a thing that terrifies me. You could say I'm chronophobic and chronophilic. I am fascinated by time, and I'm also terrified of it. So here's the scariest thing I do about it. I imagine back 10 years or 15 years in my case by now. It's getting shorter and shorter. Very recent history. 15 years ago. Move that forward another 15 years. I'm 85. Okay. If I make it that far, so I am preparing for that. I assume that I am in my what I call elder lessons, which is that I am over and underestimating how decayed I am. That is how far gone I am. I think of it like teenage years when you're trying to guess how responsible a kid's going to be. You can overguess it, underguess because they're moving. I'm moving in the other direction. That's my elder lessons. But I don't want to think about it much. I'm also thinking about it as the time of my life. This is my peak. I am still at my peak. That is, I have been on the learning curve for a long time, and I'm beginning my decline. And so I love the irony of it. If you go online, you'll find a song I wrote called "I'm Sure Gonna Miss Me When I'm Gone." It's strictly irony. A song I wrote called "Downhill from Here," which has got my favorite line I ever wrote into a song or anywhere, almost anywhere. If you notice your ability to jump and skip is slipping and much of your ability is going, don't be tripping. Compared to 20 years from now, you're agile and you're well. And viewed from future wheelchairs, today you're a gazelle. At that rate that things are going, our futures look austere. Cheer up, cause it's downhill from here. So that's where I live with it. It's kind of an ironic attitude about it. Cheer up because it's downhill from here. I'm a forward-thinking pessimist. It makes my days much brighter. Tomorrow will be heavier. Today is therefore lighter. Life's decline is certain. Of what's left, this time's the best. Enjoy it now. It's bound to be much better than the rest. It's a song I wrote I wrote it maybe, well, I wrote it so long ago that if you take that same distance of time, I'll be dead. Okay. I do also harbor this ironic conviction, which is that death is for losers, and I'm an exception. I don't believe a word of it, but I like to feel that way sometimes. Um, uh, yes, I had knee surgery a couple of years ago. It happens. Things are and what we're talking about there is exactly what's going on in America as well, which is checks and balances work for a while, but they tend to degenerate. So you could say that Trump is a cancer that hit an arthritic checks and balance system. And this is true of lots of things. It's true of partnerships or businesses. That is, if you're not doing sufficient work to maintain the checks and balances, they tend to have their limits. In our origins of life research, we do not consider replication to be the origins of life. We consider self-repair to be the origins of life. There's a capacity to heal, for the checks and balances to keep each other in check. That is the essence of what life has to do. That is the struggle for persistence that life has to do. Replication, you can't replicate if you haven't been doing that. If you're not healed, if you're degenerating, you can't replicate. So there we go. Yeah, so knees melting and the country melting down, all of that. I do wonder about my son's last thoughts, though. Yet feel death is just our next step. Okay, so Shirley, you bring up something useful for me. I have next step. Next step can mean stepping off, or it can mean stepping into another realm. So you remember, you might not have been here when I said this. If you want to, let's see, this is something I wrote yesterday. I end up putting up like 10 little memes a day, maybe on average. But sorry, I just want to find this thing. I said it a little while ago. If you want to understand the human condition, consider millennia of folk living in squalor and decay, insisting they have immortal, immaterial souls. So next step can mean that. Now, here's my take on reincarnation. I call it real incarnation. And it's just a limerick. It's not a theory. It's just reincarnation is real. Just how we'll reduce its appeal. It's your seeds and your deeds, not your soul. It recedes, hopping off after once round the wheel. I do not assume a next step for me. I assume that in a short time, I will physically exist as much as some bubble I might have seen in 1980. That is, it was a structure, or some bubble isn't quite right accurately, because we're not just bubbles. We're not just self-organization. But what I mean is what I am is a constraint. I am a limitation on what happens. I've described it as a cluster flux. That's what I assume I am. I'm a cluster flux, a checks and balances that channels energy into regenerating the cluster flux I am. Matter and energy are never created or destroyed, but constraints come and go. You know, you can build a castle, you can build a sand castle, and it erodes. And when it's gone, the matter and energy are still there, but the constraint itself is gone. So I consider myself not to be my energy and not to be the matter I'm made of. I am the constraints that limit how that stuff gets used. And so when I think about my own death, I'm thinking it's not a next step. It returns to free matter and energy, and all that's left is whatever residue I left here on Earth, as a consequence socially and all of that. And my name doesn't matter. I actually have never cared about getting my name. That's not quite true. I assume my idea. I feel like with these ideas, I just feel like some guy whose job is to keep things flowing out into a big ocean, and they're not mine. They're things at the confluence that was me, and I'm just trying to get them out there because that's what I chose to do with my life. And then when I'm gone, I'm gone. But if you've lost a child, or if you've lost someone like that, that memory is going to feel vital to you. So I totally understand why we would want to think it's a next step for self-reassurance, but also so that we can think about reconnecting with our kids, um, or our loved ones in the afterlife. I have no problem with that as a fantasy, except when it gets dangerous. There are death cults that come out of that line of work, and I think we're kind of in one here in the United States. That is, someone asked earlier, and I didn't get to it. This thing about what's up with fatalism. Um, I did come up with FIAFO, fuck it all and find out. I did write this morning. I mean, really, if you care, if you like what I write, you should be a Facebook friend because uh, because I generate this stuff a lot. Okay, so whatever, I wrote two things in a row. This is before, like this at 8 this morning. Whatever the meaning of life is for other critters, for humans, it's largely to feel meaningful, which is why only humans ask, what is the meaning of life? By which we mean, what should I do to feel meaningful? And then right after it, I wrote, Trump has reached be here now enlightenment. I'm all that matters. I'll be dead soon. My last wish, revenge rape the world. I think they are a death cult. It's largely driven by his glorious confidence. It's like, yeah, we're on the edge of survival here on the planet. Fuck it, let's just have a party and die. And there are quotes from Trump and from Giuliani where they say, "Yeah, what do I care about my legacy? I'll be dead by then." So, uh, it's always fun to say we. That's like Michael. You're that's right. That is some. That is. Uh, that is a that's a useful piece of it. If you get a chance, look up. Oh, maybe let's see. It's a piece by Archie and Mahitable. It's by Don Marcus. It was a this was an editor who wrote, and it's about a moth. I might even have time to read it to you. I sent it to my neighbor, the Nobel Prize literature winner 2020, and let's see, the moth. Let's see, Archie. It's short. Uh, hit a bell. So this was a guy. The Lesson of the Moth by Archie and Mahitable. Um, so what this is a guy who wrote for the New York Times. I'll end with this. Um, and what he did was he wrote as if he was a cockroach that was in the press office talking with a cat. He had a friend. So Mehetabel is the cat, and Archie is basically writing notes and by pouncing on the keys on a keyboard. And so there's no punctuation. He can't do any capitals because he's talking. So here it is. And it's very vernacular. So this is, I sent this to the Nobel Prize winner. She said it was the best thing she had heard, best thing she had read all year. And this was the last year of her life, she said. Okay, so here goes. I was talking to a moth the other evening. He was trying to break into an electric light bulb and fry himself on the wires. Why do you fellows pull a stunt? Why do you fellows pull this stunt? I asked him. Because it is a conventional thing for moths, or why, if that had been an uncovered candle instead of an electric light bulb, you would now be a small, unsightly cinder. Have you no sense? Plenty of it, he answered. But at times we get tired of using it. We get bored with routine and crave beauty and excitement. Fire is beautiful, and we know that if we get too close, it will kill us. But what does it matter? It is better to be happy for a moment and be burned up with beauty than to live a long time and be bored all the while. So we wad all our life up into one little roll, and then we shoot the roll. That is what life is for. It is better to be part of beauty for one instant than to cease to exist. Cease to exist than to exist forever and never be part of beauty. Our attitude towards life is easy come, easy go. We are like human beings used to be before they became too civilized to enjoy themselves. And before I could argue him out of his philosophy, he went and immolated himself on a patent cigar lighter. I do not agree with him myself. I would rather have half the happiness and twice the longevity. But at the same time, I wish there was something I wanted as badly as he wanted to fry himself. So that's that's saying we as we go downhill. And I'm more with Archie on this subject. That is, I want to extend, and I'm okay not getting that burst of excitement. If you get a chance, in here he's making loose reference to a poem that deals with exactly this that I've memorized. It's a great seduction poem. It impresses the heck out of women. And it was taught to me by a woman who figured out that it was a great way to seduce men too. It's called To His Coy Mistress. Look it up. It's great. You might know that poem. It's fabulous. To His Coy Mistress. He's basically saying, look, honey, if I had thousands of years, I would praise you slowly. The foreplay would go on forever, but we're going to be dead soon, so let's get jiggy. And it's written in the 1700s by a guy who mostly wrote political poetry. It's brilliant. You should read that one. I strongly recommend it. And then there's another one I'm going to recommend, which is on the darker side of it. It's called Aubade. So Philip Larkin remains my favorite poet because this stuff is down to earth. I have no use for romantic literary, what do they call it? Lyrical poetry. Philip Larkin. Aubade. An Aubade is a morning poem. And this, I think you'll like this one a lot. It's got a line in it that cuts to the quick, as do many Larkin lines. He says, "And only life can take so long to climb clear of its wrong beginnings, and may never." It's just one line in a poem in which he's thinking about death, and I find it powerful. Okay, we have 4 more minutes. Someone throw me something. Or nothing. Maybe we're done. I'll do my hair better next time. I didn't put any mousse on it. You know, got to look your best. Thank you again for the discussion. I'll leave it here. Let me just say 2 things. If you got any feedback for me, email me about what I could do to make my videos more workable. If you got any questions or critique or any of that, I'm around. I just do this stuff all day, sometimes with clients, sometimes online, but otherwise just writing and thinking. And then, let's see. There was one other thing. Let's see. Who obsess over dying? I forget the other thing. We'll talk next week. I'll come back on at 11. Do people prefer 11? I don't know. You can't ask a population question. It's great to be here with you. Thank you for wondering with me. Thank you for thinking with me. We'll jam some more, okay? Bye-bye.